For the World Economic Forum's 2020 annual meeting in Davos, I contributed a piece titled, "Diversity is the Top of the Corporate Agenda. Why doesn't that include faith?" In it, I summarized our data showing that the majority of Fortune 100 companies failed to mention faith or religion as part of their diversity efforts. Indeed, faith and core beliefs are taboo topics in many workplaces, but that's changing. In the wake of the pioneering religious diversity work of companies like American Airlines, American Express, Texas Instruments, Intel, Target, and Tyson Foods, more leading companies are realizing that people's personal faiths and beliefs, including non-religious beliefs, give meaning and purpose to their work. They are also realizing that including religion and belief as part of their other diversity and inclusion efforts not only strengthens overall diversity and inclusion, but it also is good for the bottom line. Increasingly, workplace leaders are realizing that their most powerful, impactful products are not limited to the products that they make or the services they provide. They're seeing that through their day-to-day operations, they can also export a culture of respect, compassion, and freedom, a different kind of product that both enriches the entire world and increases brand warmth for the company. The Religious Freedom and Business Foundation's Corporate Religious Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Index, or the READY Index, spotlights a diverse spectrum of companies where people are encouraged to bring their whole selves to work, including their faith and beliefs. It's not just confined to the early pioneers that I've just mentioned. It's happening in companies like Google, Apple, Salesforce, Accenture, PayPal, and Walmart, where faith-oriented employee research groups are growing and proliferating. Workplace chaplains are another visible symbol of this movement, not just in workplaces like the military or hospitals or athletics or even Congress, but also in Fortune 100 companies with Tyson Foods leading the way. So what's at the root of this movement? The short answer is that businesses are recognizing that for many people, trying to separate their faith from them while at work is as difficult as expecting a person to separate their race or gender or age. Their faith to them is as baked in as their personhood, into their personhood, as these other characteristics. And for some people, even more so. As Julia Othmans, a corporate leader in America, puts it, and I quote, "Over the years, the companies I had worked for had recognized my identity as a woman, but my identity in my faith is more important to me than my gender. Once the organization recognized that importance and supported my expression of my faith at work, I felt encouraged to be an integrated, aligned, values-driven leader in the company, allowing me to reach my full potential," end quote. Just let that sink in a moment. A few years ago, I was asked by the Vatican to offer insights on how freedom of religion and belief for all relates to their seminal document on faith and business. It's called The Vocation of the Business Leader. If you're familiar with the lingo, when Catholics pray for vocations, they're usually praying for young women and men to become nuns or priests, to answer God's call to that calling. So is the Vatican putting business women and men in the same category as nuns and priests? No, and yes. So no, the Vatican is not asking them to become celibate as nuns and most priests are called to be. But yes, the Vatican is asking them to see their business work as a calling from God, a vocation in Catholic lingo. The document affirms the sanctity of everyday work and says that creating goods and services that make life better for people honors God and contributes, I quote, "greatly to the material and even spiritual well-being of society," end quote. The main point of this document, the vocation of the business leader, is that people must live a congruent life, one in which everything they do at work, at home, and at worship aligns with the expectations of their faith. Of course, not all religions teach the same thing, But bringing one's full self to work, faith and beliefs and all, matters not just to Catholics and Christians and religious people, but to people from every faith and belief system, from Ahmadiyas to Zoroastrians, agnostics and atheists, and everything in between, including Baha'is and Buddhists, Hindus, Jains, humanists, Jewish people, Muslims, Sikhs, and so on. So the vocation of the business leader observes that the greatest obstacle to fulfilling this spiritual calling is not corruption. It's not the absence of the rule of law, greed, or poor stewardship of resources. Rather, the key barrier to this vocational calling is the all too often common practice of leading an incongruent, divided life where faith is checked at the workplace door. Indeed, for people of faith, regardless of their religion or belief, such a divided life is inauthentic. It requires that they essentially go undercover with their faith, as if their core identity were something shameful. This constraint saps energy, adversely impacts job satisfaction, and degrades performance. In fact, for many people of various faiths and beliefs, perceived restrictions on religious and belief expression at work causes just as much damage as denying the importance of other facets of one's identity that are protected, as is religion, by employment non-discrimination law in the US. So in a nutshell, that's why religious inclusion in the workplace is an imperative. At the same time, the business case for workplace religious equity, diversity, and inclusion is overwhelming. As companies globalize, they'll need employees who can relate to the daily experience of increasingly diverse customers. For billions of potential customers, including the world's fastest growing economies, religious belief and practice are part of daily life. Having employees who understand the ways that faith and belief are manifest in public and private life will help companies avoid costly missteps and develop products and services better tailored to customer needs, which is an essential part of being competitive. And it's not just about the workplace. What's going on in these arenas strengthens the fabric of civility throughout the whole world. It's important to emphasize that the faith and business movement is not just about allowing people to join clubs with others who believe what they believe and making them feel more appreciated, though that's helpful in its own right. It's also about building much needed bridges across cultures and beliefs. A concerted, strategic focus on workplace religious inclusion and diversity can help strengthen cultures of trust and collaboration and warmth. These are essential ingredients for team building and building success in a new era that has been indelibly changed by the coronavirus. In today's culturally divided America in particular, this might seem like a fairy tale that this could happen, but it's not. Simply put, those in corporate America for whom faith and belief matter have found that collectively protecting and celebrating the freedom for all to be authentic at work unifies rather than divides. Religious freedom for all, including people who don't have a religious faith, is a recipe for peace, as research done by the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation across the years clearly shows. The single greatest reason companies point to for not having yet joined this faith and business movement is that they fear opening the door for religion at work will instead open a Pandora's box of conflict, especially when religion coupled with politics and cultural wars clashes. However, in our experience working with scores of companies, being free to be your authentic religious self decreases conflict while increasing trust, teamwork, and morale. It also makes companies better able to relate to a national marketplace that's becoming more religiously diverse, in a global marketplace that's becoming more religious. As our data show, the religious world is outgrowing the non-religious world by a factor of 23. That's projected to year 2050. So during the pandemic lockdown, we invited people from all across corporate America to share their stories of why being able to bring their faith to work matters. I'll conclude now by summarizing a few points that come from their stories, which will be the subject of a forthcoming book, tentatively titled The Faith in Business Movement, 10 Principles Defining Its Success in Corporate America. So just a few of the principles. First, at the organizational level, all the successful faith and business initiatives in corporate America have the purpose of contributing to the success of the business. As articulated very well by Ellen Barker, the Senior Vice President at Texas Instruments, she says their faith employee resource groups have the same purpose as the company's other diversity initiatives. And they are, first, to promote a collaborative and respectful culture. 2, to recruit and cultivate talent. 3, to stimulate innovation and engagement. And 4, to give back to their communities, believing that stronger companies create stronger communities, and stronger communities build stronger companies. Second point from these diverse voices across America is that in addition to fulfilling a real-world business need, corporate America's faith and business movement works because it's a mosaic, not a melting pot. Melting pot approach expects all the different faiths and beliefs to meld together, replacing diversity with an amalgamation that no one recognizes. But a mosaic approach celebrates and educates about the distinctiveness of each, and that's at the core of diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the same time, the faith and business movement also works because it's not about dogma or politics, but about service and celebration. Arguably, this movement's a model for overcoming the polarization that's beset American society. Third, the third principle coming out, including faith enhances overall diversity. One example among many comes from the leader of the Christian employee group at Intel, who not only helped form the Interfaith Association among other faith and belief groups, including the atheist and agnostic group at Intel, but he also spearheads the annual Martin Luther King Jr. Day event as a white evangelical. Bridges of this sort are sorely needed. As another example, Faith Force had an event called Multiple Closets, where people of faith who were also members of the LGBTQ community shared about their experiences of coming out of both closets. And research shows that 6 out of 10 LGBT people are believers, and half of those are Christians by self-identification. Fourth, the faith and business movement takes more than just the form of employee resource groups. As I mentioned, it includes chaplains in hundreds of companies across the company. We're accustomed to seeing them as in hospitals and prisons, police departments, and military and Congress. But in business, yeah, not only do airports have chaplains, so do airlines. American Airlines chief flight controller at Dallas is also a priest, a workplace chaplain, and the head of their Christian employee business resource group. Also among the Fortune 100, Tyson Foods has the most well-developed chaplaincy program, with chaplains hired on staff across many of their factories. The objective of the Tyson chaplain program is to help the company live out their culture as a faith-friendly and inclusive company, scoring high on all the diversity metrics. Fifth, being religiously inclusive adds ethical resources. Now, people of faith who identify with faith are not necessarily more ethical or virtuous than those who do not embrace faith. There are plenty of religious people who don't carry their religion into the workplaces or live up to their ideals and fail. But personal faith itself often involves the aspiration of being guided by a clear ethical compass that focuses on faith, hope, love, and humility. But for some people, faith permeates their lives. It changes what they do in business and how they do it. That's important to the bottom line, because while people of faith do not have a corner on the market of ethics, they have belief systems that call them to high standards, which is a boon within any business, because a healthy, ethical corporate culture must rest on more than just ethical codes and compliance mechanisms. What's needed is a connection with the employees' hearts and core values and beliefs that govern what they do when nobody's looking. And finally, this will not go away. Religion is one of the few social institutions that has endured across the millennia, and it accompanies people from cradle to grave. It marks rites of passage such as baptism, bar mitzvahs, and it's present in last rites. And in most religions, it provides a hope of resurrection that all is not done when we die. In their faith, people are much more complex than typical management training recognizes. Human souls, however you understand that, are at work every day, impacted by the corporate and social cultures we operate in. We all bring that part of us to work, and these cultures around us have the power to enrich or impoverish our souls. Accenture's tagline is creating the most truly human company in the digital age. Helen Shook, the Chief Leadership and Human Resources Officer at Accenture, wrote a compelling article on October 28th, 2018, titled, "Stop Wondering If Faith is a Workplace Issue." It is. Well, the date of her article's significance, the day after the Tree of Life synagogue mass shooting in Pittsburgh that claimed the life of 11 people and wounded 6 others, including 4 police officers, during a Shabbat morning service. It was the deadliest attack on America's Jewish history. Mass killings like this one affect not only friends and family of those killed or hurt, but entire religious communities who feel vulnerable and wonder if their place of worship is next, if they're next. Rather than retreat from the horror, Ellen reached out to her colleagues in Accenture who could help find the words to discuss a way forward together. The faith ERGs at Accenture were there to help take the lead and help the company respond in ways that brought both healing and a knowledge that the company stood against religious intolerance and for religious inclusion in the workplace and in society. How faith in business works in such times is wonderfully captured in a tweet by Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff in the response to the Easter Sunday bombings of churches across Sri Lanka a few years ago. This is his tweet. I learned today that a member of our Ohana lost a family member in Sri Lanka. Thank you to our Muslim, Buddhist, Jewish, and Hindu Ohana who held a vigil for our whole Christian Ohana. May times of tragedy remind us all that light shines in the darkness, John 1:5, hashtag FaithForce. And for those who aren't familiar with John 1:5 that Mark Benioff quoted, it's a reference to Jesus's life being the light of all people. In quotes, "The light shines in the darkness and the darkness did not overcome it." As companies navigate a constantly changing world, the faiths and beliefs of their employees provide added resources that not only deal with uncertainty and tragedy, but also are wells of innovation, values, and resilience. To be competitive in today's and tomorrow's marketplaces, companies need to set this force for good free by including religion as a full-fledged part of their diversity, equity, and inclusion commitments. But how? Well, that's what we're here to help with through training materials, conferences, discussions, and more. So let's keep the conversation going.